Jauncey, and I am I'm a writer and a blogger and a passionate supporter of independence.
Okay, so let's unpick some of that, because you've obviously been around and about, and so you're a writer, which is what you said first of all. So what do you write?
I've written all sorts of things over the years. I've written fiction. I have done a lot of work as a writer in the business world, and I run writing training program for people in business. But it's a creative writing program, but it's aimed at people at work, really. I've published 5 novels over the years. I haven't written a novel for quite a long time, and I'm currently writing a biography of my great-great-uncle.
Your business training things, and how does what that is that the actual techniques of doing business?
It's really about encouraging people to treat writing at work as they would treat any other kind of writing, with humanity. That's absolutely the key to it. So with empathy, with imagination, with personality. So it's about the absolute opposite of dry, convoluted, alienating corporate language. It's to try and loosen all that up and get people communicating at work as they do in the rest of their lives.
We both lived in the south of England for some time during our childhoods, and I don't know about you, but I was taken to elocution lessons, and that, of course, one of the key factors that people always judge, and they judge you in 30 seconds or something, don't they? Is the voice. You were born in Comrie, was it?
I was born in Comrie, but we actually lived in. Yes, my grandparents lived in Comrie, and I was born there. But we actually lived in Edinburgh until I was 9, because my father was at the bar. He was an advocate in Edinburgh. And then we moved back up to my grandparents' house when I was about 9. So I spent most of my childhood in Perthshire, and my father continued to work as a QC in Edinburgh, and but we lived in the country, which was lovely. But I was very lucky to be brought up there.
How did you get to go to the south of England?
Well, I was sent to school. I was sent to boarding school in England, and kind of the easy answer to why I speak as I do is partly that, and partly that after I had come back, been to Aberdeen University, got a law degree, I then went to London. So it was 1971, I think, and to be honest, I wanted to go to the bright lights and get down there and see what the world had to offer for me. So I spent 20 years in London, and then came back to Scotland when I was about 40. The pull got stronger and stronger, and I was freelancing. I was working for myself. I was doing what we've just been talking about. I was writing the business world. I was starting to write fiction. I didn't really need to be in London, and I'd had 20 years there and really enjoyed it, had a wonderful time, but felt that I'd really wanted to get back to Scotland.
You did travel away to South America, I think.
I travelled a lot. I really got the travel bug. In my last year at school, I discovered that there was a scholarship for somebody to go to Greece, and I was studying Latin and Greek at the time. Those were my A-level subjects. I wasn't very good at them, actually, as it happened. But anyway, so I went to Greece my last summer at school with a friend on my own, and I loved the whole experience of being somewhere foreign and hot. And then I travelled until I was in my sort of mid to late 20s and really had to stop and settle down. I travelled a lot. I drove out to Tehran in 1969, which was an amazing experience with some friends. And then I spent a year in South America in 72 and 73.
Okay, so we've gone through your life story without the desert island discs, but so you've got back to Scotland, and now you're getting involved with the politics of the place, and understanding that maybe this country wasn't being quite properly run, because we've got this great thing having the Westminster Parliament and a bit of the devolved government up in Holyrood. Did you come before we got the Parliament, or did you come after?
I came in 1990, so it was all building up. It was actually a very, very good timing for me coming back, because I mean, I think you probably read in the sort of background story in my blog. I mean, I was brought up in a very Tory environment in the 1963 Perth and Kinross election. Alec Douglas Hume's campaign team stayed with my parents in our home. Things had changed so much when I came back. And I got into it. I sort of began to really feel the change through my connection both with the literary world. I ended up being chairman of the Society of Authors quite soon after coming back in Scotland. Of course, that was a time when it was beginning to really blossom, and Kelman and Irvine Welsh and Ian Rankin and Jackie Kay and all those, James Roberts, and all those voices were starting to come out, and I was very excited by that, because there was a whole new confidence. You know, this was the sort of the flowering, the new Scottish literary renaissance was happening. And the other place that I really connected was through music, because I've always played, and I had played semi-professionally when I was living in London, alongside the other things I was doing. Land issue was a really interesting one, because I mean, I'd grown up in Perthshire amongst landowners who were my parents' friends, and you know, their children were my friends, and some of them still are. And I, of course, as a child growing up, I never thought about really who owned it. And coming back again, I remember going and talking to Andy Whiteman quite soon after I got back from London, and being very interested in what he had to say, and starting to think differently about this issue of the fact that so few people own so much of the Scottish land, and what that says about the country, and what it says about where the power resides, and all of those things. So it was 1990 was a really exciting time for me to come back.
Okay, so then you also have a deeper rooted connection with Scottish politics, in that one of your ancestors was not only a part founder of the Labour Party with Keir Hardie, but also part founder of what it's now become, the SNP.
Yes, that's right. Robert Cunningham Graham, who, yes, he supported Keir Hardie in the foundation of the Independent Labour Party, which then later became the Labour Party that we know today. And they were both. Robert had been elected as a Liberal candidate initially in northwest Lanarkshire, and he had a very stormy 6 years in Westminster. He was very outspoken. He ruffled feathers everywhere he went, and was even, I mean, he was expelled from the House for uttering the word "damn," which was considered very profane in those days. And he was actually arrested and imprisoned for 6 weeks in Pentonville for leading a charge on the police in the riot in Trafalgar Square known as Bloody Sunday in 1886. I've got to the point in life where I just can't, dates don't lodge any longer, but it was around about then. Very colourful character. And then later in life, I mean, he was always a great advocate of Home Rule for Scotland, and that in the early days was kind of the Labour Party, the Independent Labour Party was one of their big issues. And I think he became disenchanted as the Labour Party gathered force and grew, and Scotland kind of slipped down the agenda and eventually pretty much fell off it. So in later life, he became involved in the various national movements, and he was I think he was the founding president of the National Party of Scotland, which first came together in the late 1920s, and that was one of the 2 or 3 groups that came together to form the SNP. And he, in fact, only 2 years before he died in 1934, was made the sort of it was an honorary position, really, because he wasn't very active by then, but founding president, the first president of the SNP, which is the role that Mike Russell now has, of course.
Over these years since 1990, the SNP have become the dominant of the political forces in Scotland, and they look really at the present time unassailable, in that really there's not that much of an opposition. It looks from John Curtis was saying that the SNP will get a majority according to the polling. The polling for independence has been around about 52% in favour of independence, if you take the don't knows out of the equation. So we've got into this new situation. And what you were saying on your blog was the reasons that you think that we in Scotland should have our own independent country.
The basic principle is that we are a nation, and we're a nation for 800 years, a sovereign independent nation from around about the 9th century AD until the time of the Act of Union, which was incredibly unpopular in its day anyway. The union now has absolutely nothing at all to offer us. But I'd much rather make the positive case for independence than the negative case against the union. I mean, I think that's really important here. And I just feel that this is a country that's got so much. It has a mature economy. It has most of the institutions that we would need in order to be able to function independently. It has the experience of running them. But more than that, we're an incredibly resourceful, inventive, creative nation. So much of what we see around us in the modern world today has come. The original thinking has come from Scots. You know, we punched way above our weight in the 18th century. You know, Edinburgh was one of the absolute hotspots of the Enlightenment. And we lost our way. There's no doubt about it in the 20th century, and probably before that. But in the 20th century, we really did lose our way. And actually, the blog I've just posted this morning is about that old story, that kind of becoming infected with low self-esteem, and how that has changed. That we've swung through that, and now there is a lot more confidence. But we're so distinct culturally, socially, politically too, and I think that we're now pulling in almost diametrically the opposite direction to England, certainly in political terms. It's our instinct as Scots to be social democrats, to be socially aware and socially just, to be welcoming, to be tolerant. I mean, in practical terms, we were talking before we started about that we actually need population in Scotland. We don't want to keep people out. We want to welcome them in, and we're good at that. We're warm-hearted towards foreigners. I'm personally pretty sort of steeped in the music of the country, and there's that fantastic sort of wellspring of music which is so closely connected to the land. I mean, this is the emotional stuff, but you've got to take account of it because it's where the energy comes from, and I believe that really strongly. And also, as we were talking earlier on, from what is written about Scotland. So it's easy to say what it is to be Scottish in a way that I don't think it's nearly so easy to say what it is to be English. And I mean, that's a whole other train of thought, which is a really interesting one, is actually, it seems to me that given what's going on, it is England who are going to have to really address the issue of their identity right now, because we're really clear about ours, or we're getting a hell of a lot clearer. Wales are on the march now too, you know, which is an astonishing thing and a wonderful thing in a way. Ireland, who knows what's going to happen in Ireland, but identity isn't so much of an issue for the Celtic nations. And I think it's very interesting that England are going to have to really address that now, whatever the outcome of this election, whatever the outcome of a referendum, in order for us to exist as good neighbours. They have to know who they are. And I think it's easier for us to know who we are. I feel it's a right to be independent. I mean, you know, we're not and I feel very. I'm sorry for the Catalans, because I think that they have a much more difficult constitutional fight on their hands, because they're as far as I understand it, their role as a province, or whatever their status is within Spain, is kind of enshrined in the Spanish constitution, and they're locked into that. We're not. We're in a voluntary union. We should be able to, at our own determination, be able to leave it, if that is the will of our people. And I feel, I just feel very strongly that we will make a much better job of it on our own than we ever could, and particularly now with what's going on in Westminster. We don't have the opportunity to fulfil our own potential while we remain answerable in certain areas of our own functioning to the government that's in the capital of a neighbouring country 500 miles away. It just is. It makes no sense at all to me that is the situation.
Yeah, we need really to get a hold of the foreign policy.
Yeah,
get a hold of the full taxation. So we've got the fiscal things. We need a central bank here, of course.
Well, I mean, I'm not an economist, and it's not an area that I'm particularly knowledgeable about. But I know, for example, that that Scotland has an export surplus and has exported more than it's imported every year since records began, which I think is a period of about 30 years. That our exports per head of population place us somewhere just behind Norway and just behind Norway and just ahead of Sweden, or the other way around, and double what the rest of the UK is in terms of percentage per head of population. I mean, we've got lots of thriving industries. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the pandemic is obviously going to is going to hit everybody hard. And there's going to be a period of recovery from that. I don't know how that's going to work. And of course, there will be a period, should we vote to become independent, there will be a transition period when I'm quite certain that things will need to be sorted out and settle down. But the point I would make, and I mean, I'm not an economist, and I'm not terribly up in economic matters, but I would just say that I don't know how many countries in the last 100 years have become independent, separated out of a larger country, or split themselves with their neighbour. I mean, somebody from Slovak TV interviewed me the other day, and they had that experience of splitting from the Czech Republic in more or less equal halves. But they all manage it. These are practicalities, and I find it really quite disheartening sometimes when I feel that it's the issue is so much bigger than the practicalities, because there's no history of people fundamentally getting the practicalities wrong. Mm-hmm. They always get sorted out, and they will get sorted out. And if we vote for independence, there are enough people who are expert enough in their own fields and enough negotiators that we'll do what we need to do once we've made that decision. So from my perspective, what is so important is that we get the decision in the first place. And that's the decision that is fueled by, with the energy from that comes from the passion, the longing to be free and running our own affairs like adults. I mean, it's a little bit like a teenager wanting to leave home. I mean, it's not a terribly good analogy in some ways, because clearly we're not a teenage country, we're a mature country. But at the same time, they won't let us out of the house. We don't want to be living here any longer. We want to be in our own gaff,